Welcome, everybody, to the Fantasy Formula Live, and we're here ahead of the sprint race for the Chinese Grand Prix. Terry and Zach, did you stay up or did you get up early for this?
I
You
definitely didn't
stumped them
stay
both.
up. No, I got a good about 2.5 hours of sleep. And I think that's about all I'm gonna get tonight. So we're gonna have to power through a lot of coffees. Yeah, we'll see how it goes.
I just powered through, waiting for the FIA to remember that they had to look at Williams. But yeah, no, it was worth going to bed in the end. So we just power through and drink much more coffee than normal.
It's only 10 p.m. here in Boston, so I'll talk nice and slowly for the two of you. I'll keep the energy up. We're going to have ourselves a good night here. Now, we're starting the show with some breaking news because we just heard that Nico Hülkenberg is going to start the sprint from the pit lane. Terry, there was a little confusion here because the original briefing from the FIA said it'll be at the start of the race, which sounds like it was just shorthand for the sprint race, which they've since fixed.
Yeah, no, they've definitely confirmed it's definitely the sprint race. I mean, part firming gets lifted anyway after the sprint race itself, so ready for qualifying. So it makes perfect sense. He was quite low down anyway, so I don't think it's a huge impact on his day, to be honest. And it will also give us a good data for qualifying and the race itself. So it's a good move from a fancy points point of view, because hopefully that will mean a few more overtakes, if nothing else.
And no turn one carnage either. You never know what's going to happen going down to turn one with the back of the grid there. So good news for Hülkenberg. All right, let's fire up some of the sprint qualifying results just so we can start taking a look at the grid. Remember, if you go over to the FanAmp app, they've updated the starting grid to include Nico Hülkenberg starting from the pit lane. So that's my reliable source to make sure we're talking about the right stuff here on this show. All right, so my man Lewis Hamilton, I've got the Ferrari shirt on here. Sprint pole. Terry, what do you see from the pace of the Ferrari, and is this sustainable enough for Lewis to win the sprint race today?
Definitely the Ferrari looks a lot more settled this weekend than it did last weekend. I still think that McLaren have got more pace to come, but then I also think that Ferrari also look like they hold more pace. Certainly, Charles looked like he can extract a bit more from the car as well. So I think the sprint race, they've got a good chance of holding on. But I also think that McLaren will certainly come back at them, and potentially for qualifying in the race itself, I'm expecting to see a bit more from McLaren, if I'm honest, especially considering they can get the data from the sprint race.
Makes a lot of sense. Lando was really on a lap right at the end of SQ3, and then he went on to have just a quick moment. He had to abort the lap, and then he pitted, but I think he really would have contended for sprint pole had he done that. Just want to say hi to some of our friends in the chat here. Hey, Mike, George's, Brian, Aeroblade, ATL, welcome to the show. Zach has just been waving away the whole time, taking care of all of you for us. Zach, is there any sprint qualifying result that stands out to you?
I mean, it's got to be Lando Norris, doesn't it? I can't see any world where he stays P6. So I'm very much expecting a lot of overtakes and position gains points for him. And then it's all about which one do you prefer, Norris or Piastri, or maybe someone else, for the basically qualifying in a race tomorrow. Who will do better there? But for now, I think Norris definitely has the edge, and that's why I quite like him in some team selections.
A little foreshadowing for later, too. Terry, while we're talking about the sprint event and some breaking news, there are some questions in the chat about the outcome of the Williams investigation. Do you know any new news?
There's no further action, I don't believe, for Williams, because they've just announced the final starting grid for the sprint, and Williams are where they were. So I think in a roundabout way, it looks like whatever's happening to Williams is either financial or certainly isn't going to impact them, because according to the FIA, they're in their positions they qualified in for the sprint, which is normally only published after all of the investigation stuff have been done. So they've literally just released that a minute ago. So I think Williams will be safe.
And so what that means is they're not going to get that disqualification penalty to go to the back of the grid. It wouldn't have affected us from a point standpoint in F1 Fantasy, but it would have allowed more overtakes. But I do like Albon and Sainz at 9 and 13, respectively. I think you're going to have a lot of jostling in the midfield as they fight for position in this race. Second most overtakes among all Grand Prix in 2024. And for those of you that use the Limitless chip, there was a huge points haul, 456 when it was all said and done. Zach, I want to take us over now to this new tool from F1 Fantasy Tools, because I think that's going to drive so many of our responses to your questions this week. Do you want to walk us through not only what this tool is, but what are some guys that stand out to you when we look at it?
So this is the new fancy area on F1 Fantasy tools to really help you buckle down on getting your budget right for F1 Fantasy. And I think this is such a perfect tool to have right now, considering how important all of this budgeting talk is. So as you can see straight away, it goes from tier A to tier B on both the drivers and the constructors, and it just gives you a nice rundown of where it thinks everyone's going to increase. So as you can see, most of the tier A drivers it does think is going to get the 0.3 increase, which I'm not surprised with, to be fair. I think Hamilton, Leclerc, Russell, Verstappen, Piastri, Norris all have the chance to get over 20 points, which would basically all put them at least close to that 0.3 million increase, or if not above it. And the main one that does interest me is just when you look at that tier B, how many drivers are at minus 0.58 or below. That is incredible. That is basically giving them 99.9% certainty that they will definitely get that minus 0.6 increase, which I think we knew from already, but it really does just show on a nice graph exactly why we don't want some of these assets in our team.
And also, too, when you think about Carlos Sainz entering the game last week as one of the most selected assets in the game, if people aren't aware of how pricing works, you could have a lot of teams taking negative 0.6 on Sainz for 2 weeks in a row. That budget gap between those of us that are engaged and those that don't quite know how pricing works, it's going to spread throughout the course of the season, and we're going to start being able to run some mega teams in due time. So I'm really excited to see how this plays out. And also, there are so many drivers in this area I'm circling here that we've got to try to get on our teams this week to take advantage of that cost cap building, because I think this is one of the most prime weeks of the season to get it, especially in a sprint weekend where you have 3 events and the bar is so low to clear the 0.6 million gain.
Talking about team setups as well, the first poll of the day, I have asked, will anyone have any Ferrari assets this weekend? 61% still say no. So a lot of people not jumping on that Ferrari bandwagon.
You know, one thing that I noticed in the long run data is that Ferrari didn't have any long runs. So that's not to say that Lewis can't win the sprint, but we just don't know what Ferrari's long run pace is. How are they going to handle the degradation on a track that's recently been resurfaced? Could they struggle in the Grand Prix tomorrow? Could this just be a flash in the pan for today? I don't think it's enough for me to trust putting, especially the individual driver assets, but definitely not enough for me to run the constructor, considering some of the other options that are out there. And that might be a good time, Zach, for us to pivot back over to our tier list, just to show what's updated since we last met for our preview show earlier this week. You can see we love McLarens, all 3 of them in the buy category, but I can see some teams that have George Russell and Mercedes because you're trying to get in some of these tier B assets that are standing to gain some money this week. Zach and Terry, does anyone else stand out to you on either side of the fence?
Ooh. It's still got to be... I'm a little bit worried about the Behrman situation, just because it does look like potentially he's not going to do fantastic points-wise. If the long-run pace of Haas is that dreadful, then he'll get negative points. However, we're at such a crossroad where we kind of just have to put up with it. Points-wise, Behrman I'm not too excited about, but he's still better than one of those minus 0.6 increases.
Yeah, I think for me, it's like we said, in terms of points-wise, Behrman kind of doesn't strike me as Haas are going to have a great weekend, but points-wise, you're going to be fine. Liam Lawson is an interesting one for me. Got a brand new gearbox, brand new suspension on that Red Bull for today, but I think price-wise kind of puts him out, but performance-wise could be interesting to watch, which is when I'm certainly looking closely at. And obviously, Jack Doohan's got a lot to do, but in terms of fancy-wise, I'm afraid I can't see him doing anything which is going to help the fancy teams, unfortunately.
One thing that sticks out to me, and I think you'll see this come through in a lot of our answers when we go through people's teams in just a moment, is we tend to like the high-end constructors, with Williams being a good budget enabler with some pretty decent points upside. I don't like a lot of these tier B constructors that could gain more this week, because I'm thinking the pit stop points are going to play a bigger role this week than they did in Australia. This is a 2-stop strategy race. China has one of the longest pit straights, and so you've got to get that pit stop down as fast as possible. And I think our top teams up here are going to get at least a few 10-point bonuses, if not that sub 2 second 20-point bonus. right. Where do we want to go next? There's the price change algorithm. If anybody missed it, chips. I know I've seen a lot of questions in the chat about chips this week. I think there's two that you're going to see all over the place. Wild card, if you just didn't quite get it right for Australia, you had 3 or more of those DNFs and you want to hit the reset button. Or, as you'll see in our lineups in a few minutes, if you're chasing that cost cap to get that benefit for the rest of the season. And then, of course, there's limitless. If your team did okay last weekend, you want to carry over some of their price gains because that's the team that's going to get the price changes. You could run the 5 best drivers and the 2 best constructors. Let's pause there because I've seen some questions in the chat. What is the best limitless team? Let's go back up to our rankings and talk about the best limitless team. For me, I think it's all 3 McLaren assets. Maybe Ferrari because they're looking good in the sprint, but I could see why you'd put Mercedes with, I'd say, at least 1 Ferrari, Verstappen, and then flip a coin between George Russell and the other Ferrari. Any dissents from either of you?
Mercedes still got that question mark, haven't they, with sort of warmer weather running we haven't seen a lot of still. So I'll probably go more Ferrari than Mercedes, if I'm honest, just based on that. But nothing really sort of stands out. Max, as we said, is dragging that Red Bull kicking and screaming around China at the moment. But then you also feel Red Bull with overnight more data as well in the race will actually come back even stronger again. Traditionally they come back on a Saturday stronger for the Sunday, and with the data they're going to be able to get and extract from the actual sprint race today, that's actually going to only help them. So yeah.
Terry's always a bit bullish on Red Bull.
Absolutely. Well, I'm bullish on Max, I should say, rather than Red Bull, because I think we've got 2 complete spectrums here. But for me, Max is just one of those drivers who, as long as you've got a half decent chance, he will be up there and he will make sure that car's up there. So it's one of those where, in terms of the team, actually, there's some question marks over Liam. But in terms of Max getting that Red Bull, there's no question marks for me on that one.
Yeah, definitely on my side of Limitless, it's very much heavy on the triple McLaren, triple Ferrari, Verstappen kind of thing. I just haven't seen enough from Mercedes yet to make me want to go over to them.
A lot of questions in the chat about 2 drivers on our fence here. Behrman versus Tsunoda. Of course, Tsunoda is a little bit more expensive than Behrman. One of the questions in the chat is Behrman with $3.5 million in the bank or Tsunoda with almost nothing left. That's a close one. Because if we go back to the budget builder here.
This is so hard because I would be prone to actually think, I know it says Tsunoda is going to get a price decrease more likely than Behrman, but I'd be prone to think Tsunoda has a better chance of gaining more points, so it's a safer option. However, this is where we start looking into like beyond China again for F1 fantasy teams. If you bring in Tsunoda, you're locking away quite a big portion of your budget where, let's say we have, because there is no saying that coming out of China, we all do the exact same thing that happened in China, and we need to swap over a lot of our teams again. And if you've got a lot of money in the likes of Tsunoda, it's going to be hard to get out of. Like, B tier wise, that's why you want to be a little bit careful.
It's a good point because with a lot of these lineups that we're about to go through and showing you ours in just a few minutes, we want to think 2 races ahead. We don't want to set ourselves up for too much weirdness and then take 3 or more transfers to get out of it for Japan in 2 weeks. You could see here Behrman expected with more points, I think just because he's starting a little bit lower than Tsunoda. Also, lower threshold to get the 0.6 million. So I do like Ollie a bit better. But of course, there's that DNF risk for the rookie in a circuit that he hasn't quite raced at in F1. So I would lean toward Behrman here.
Yeah, it's not a high sort of crash risk, though, is it, China? I mean, lots of longer runoffs, a couple of gravel trap potentials, but it's not one where, you just over 50% chance of safety car. It's not a huge one in terms of risk from a crash. It's more of a problem with putting it into the gravel, putting it into grass, getting off that side. But there's some areas you can back out in China and actually still keep within the race. So I think that sort of DNF from that point of view is a lot easier in China.
Want to dive into some lineups, but first, let me reveal my lineup. And I don't know if you all noticed the Easter egg, but in our ticker tonight, we have all 3 of our locked-in lineups. So keep an eye on that, or you can keep an eye right here where I'm going to show my team first. I'm using the wildcard chip. And I want to anchor my team with Lando and McLaren just to get as many points out there as possible. I think they're about as safe as you could get with the driver constructor combo this weekend. And then trying to bring in as many cost cap builders as possible. Stroll, Behrman, Hulkenberg, and Williams all looking good to gain some cost cap this week. Lando and McLaren with some modest gains in their future as long as they keep it on the rails this weekend. Hadjar, I think I just have to sacrifice this week. He's going to take another negative 0.6, but I think he has the opportunity to get some decent points in that Racing Bulls. So I'm going to try this week. It takes all of my 99.9 million of cost cap. So I'm going to give it a shot.
Yeah, I like the look of this team. It's I won't give any spoilers too soon, but it really is a beautiful mix of balancing, making sure you're getting those good points for the sprint race, because it's so important still to make sure your team is getting okay points. There's so many points on offer at a sprint race weekend. And then also literally 6, if we're 6 of those assets, if we're including Ollie Behrman, will most likely increase after China, which is phenomenal. You're setting yourself up for such a great weekend.
I'm excited for it. Now that you know where I'm leaning, let's look into some of these lineups here, starting with Woo True Racing, debating budget building versus points. All would take a -20 penalty, which is right around my fence for using wild cards. So you could use wild card this week. I think -20 is around what I was looking at with my team, and I did use it. And in these options, we have Lando, McLaren, Haas, Antonelli, McLaren, Williams, and then Piastri, McLaren, Williams. And then a little bit of mix up in the midfield, but it's basically Yuki or Albon all the way across.
The second one looks very budget build, doesn't it? Rather than point scoring, I'd say, straight off looking at that. So I think that second one, if you're going for budget, is probably where I would lean towards. Probably your mind doesn't think it's going to look that spectacular, but I think looking at the assets you've got there for your budget, actually, that's going to help.
For me, I like the balance of the third team just a little bit better. I think Oscar and McLaren are going to have a little bit more of a points upside than Kimi and McLaren. I do like... I like Alex a little bit better than Yuki because he has that guaranteed price increase. I'm staying away from Haas this week just because I don't know as a constructor how much they could do. Maybe gain a few positions, but they're really not in it for getting into Q3. They're really not in it for the pit stop points. So I think Williams does have a little bit of a shout, whereas Haas just doesn't appeal to me.
Yeah, and it really is interesting when you go from the Norris builds over to the Piastri builds, because at the minute, Piastri would give you a bit more budget to work around, potentially getting 7 out of 7 of your assets looking good on the price increases. But it really does all come down to who do you think's going to either do better on points or win the race. And, well, I won't say just yet who I'm thinking, but it's very decisive, and it's probably the most important, or maybe one of the most important things you've got to make sure you get right on your team, because the difference between Norris and Piastri for whoever wins or whoever gets potentially driver of the day, fastest lap, all of this extra stuff could end up being like a good 20 odd points ahead of them. And then with the extra DRS, that's a 40-point gap just from one driver already on the teams. So it's going to be interesting.
It's a big swing. A couple of quick related questions I'm seeing in the chat. George wants to know, if I made transfers, took the -20, and now I play the wild card, will I still lose those points? I haven't tried it in 2025, but I did try it last year, and the wild card should give you unlimited transfers and take away those points. I haven't tried it out in the 2025 game yet.
It does, yeah. It does. Okay. I've tried it. So I made my transfers first, and then played the wild card. So yeah, there's a hint to that I've played mine, but it certainly does that one because I had -60, so I had to take it.
Terry, do you want to tell the rest of the class how we got to that point? Or
what about why I ended up with -60 and had to play wildcard? Because the app's really stupid. Yeah, so last season this happened quite a lot, and I certainly haven't learned from my mistakes. So basically, I was messing with my team on Tuesday, and I made some moves which I was playing with the budget, and I pressed save rather than quit out of the app, and therefore it meant that I saved my team with a team that wasn't really what I wanted at all. So it was left with no transfers, a team I didn't want. So had to make a quick exit out of it. So yeah, I wish the app would kind of let you either roll back or do something on it. Bit of feedback for him, I'm sure, but we learn by our mistakes, or in this case, we don't. We just make it once a year and then move on very swiftly. And makes it all a bit exciting, doesn't it? So that's my reason behind the chip. I could sit here and go, I studied all of this data, and you know what? I looked at the pricing breakdown, and I put it all in there. But it isn't. I made a rookie mistake and ended up having to use it to get out of it very quickly.
Word on the street is that Williams is officially a fine. So all good news for the Williams team.
Yeah, so 50,000 euro and 40,000 if it's been suspended. So yeah, it's a slap on the wrist. Yeah.
Well, Terry, you are not alone on the wildcard play. I can tell you that, because 57% of people in the chat at the minute are using wildcards. Incredible.
Go chat. There we go.
56 made the same mistake I did.
Let's move over to Opinion Snafu, because Opinion Snafu has given
that
us...
as a chat question.
Oh my gosh. Did everyone do what Terry did?
Did everyone do what I did? Or is everyone else actually using it for a tactical reason?
All right, 3 very different teams from Opinion Snafu. We've got Oscar with Mercedes and Ferrari, Lewis with McLaren and Williams, Max with Red Bull and Williams. I'm going to rule out the Max and Red Bull team right away. That feels like we're over-indexing on a Red Bull that doesn't feel totally hooked up yet. Max put on a lap at the very end of SQ3, so it looks like they're fast, but I can still see them behind McLaren and Ferrari tomorrow in the race. So I don't quite trust Red Bull yet. And as much as it pains me, I don't know, because we don't have any long run data, that the Ferrari, and particularly Lewis, could be podium contender for both races. So for me, I stay nice and traditional with number 1, a balance of, actually, this is mostly just leaning toward cost cap gain. Maybe potentially you move from Alonso to another one of those gainers like a Hulkenberg, or if you can afford Stroll with that, just get some of that price gain up too.
I really do like what that second team did as well. Just for a differential. If you really don't want to use one of the McLaren assets, and Hamilton does do incredible throughout the full weekend, you'd be sitting pretty after all of that.
Let's go to our friend BZ. Brian wants to know, Team 1 with wildcard. Still a little nervous about Stroll's history in China. I think it's only one race for Lance, so I'm gonna give him a pass on this one. And I don't want to put this in the world. Sorry if it comes back to bite me, but he can still do quite bad and still gain 0.6 million. So
yeah,
you can be optimistic and pessimistic at the same time and still come out okay.
Yeah, it might be one of those where Lance doesn't do as well as we expect, but actually gets a nice salary going up after the weekend in terms of price.
All right, Youngheart is considering lineup 1 for gaining as much value as possible. Could be good points. Lineup number 2. Ooh, triple Mercedes.
Whoa.
I mean, that is a differential.
I would slide that 2x to George if I was a betting man.
Yes.
Definitely.
Funnily enough, though, with that, I'm quite amazed at how you can still get really good budgeting there. Because like that, actually, I wouldn't even have considered a team like that. But that doesn't look too shabby, to be fair.
It's not crazy at all. You think about how much price gain you can get in that team. That's everybody gaining this week.
Absolutely. I mean, that is a bold budget move, isn't it? With a potential to be completely different to what everyone else is doing. So if it actually pays off results wise as well, you could end up winning on both counts. To be honest, I would go that one. I would take the gamble.
Yeah, it's not bad at all. Especially if you didn't need the wild card to get into this, but you could use the wild card to get out of it for Suzuka. You've got the big budget, and then you can get into a more traditional McLaren heavy team. Quite like
absolutely, yeah.
I'm going to hit refresh just in case anybody submitted some new ones. Ooh, there we go.
Coming back to the Stroll as well, I've just double checked the stat. He would need around -5 points to not get that 0.6 increase.
Ooh.
So yeah,
it's sketchy.
It would take a DNF.
It's sketchy.
Oh, no.
But just enough doubt in our hearts. My team is locked in. I'm not going back on Lance Stroll. Youngheart, you made it just in time for us to go over your team. Welcome aboard. This is a name that I'm not going to pronounce. Do I run Aston or Haas as my second constructor? This is a team with Lando and McLaren as your anchors, double Haas, Hulkenberg, and Stroll. Well, if you're nervous about Stroll, running Stroll ×2 with the constructor would be extra risky. But I like where your head's at with the price game.
Yeah, I can see why you would drop down Williams to Aston Martin to make sure that you didn't have any of those minus 0.6 decreases. Uh, I do just worry because Williams don't look too bad, and I don't really know where Aston Martin are at the minute. So points wise, I'd be a little bit worried for them. And yeah, Lance Stroll doubling up does worry me.
Could you swap that Aston Martin for Williams? What's the difference in the price on that one?
Oh, it'd
It
be a
would
good
be
5-ish million difference. So you'd probably have to
bring like a Hadger or something, wouldn't you? Then at the top.
yeah.
That's the downside, isn't it?
Williams still the most selected constructor at 34%. So if you pick them and they go down, you go down with the ship. We're all there with you. Hey, we got Leapsfrog in the chat. Hey, Andrew. I'm dying to know what you're going with this week. Andrew went big with the budget last week. It's what propelled him to being P1 in the world last year. And I'm dying to see how he follows that up this year. This is the first sprint of the season. And he had a mega team in China last year.
Doing the maths that you can't put Williams in there faster than I can actually figure it out. So, yeah, thank you for that, Andrew.
Terry and Zach, are either of you ready to share your teams yet? If you could drop them on Twitter.
I'm ready. I've got it nicely saved in my drafts. Let me just get it up and I'll post it and we're good to go.
Well, you'll
let me know when you're there and I'll head over to Twitter. In the meantime, throw up the team calculator for anybody who isn't familiar with it, isn't already using it.
Did I see someone said that that's been refreshed? Potentially, the team calculator. I'm sure I saw that in chat somewhere.
Yes, I
just
did see that in the chat as well.
Saw an alert.
No.
Post sprint quali V2. Has anyone been paying attention enough to know the difference between V1 and V2? Is the question.
Hopefully not enough to change his lineup again.
Still looking at the top here. Look at McLaren. Still just absolutely huge. McLaren as a constructor, absolutely huge. I think Williams have gone up just a tiny bit.
91.2, yeah. Incredible. I mean, Ferrari at 67.9, about what I expected. Red Bull's higher than I think. Do we think Red Bull will score more than Mercedes? Maybe if they get their pit stops right? That'd be the only way, surely.
Maxon and pit stop, I think, could do it for Red Bull, but
yeah,
I don't have faith in Liam.
Is people relying on Liam coming back through the pack? Is that what the other side of it is?
Oh, true. Yeah, it might be.
Is that where we're going? New gearbox, new suspension is actually knowing that they got good pit stops. Actually, someone thinking that.
Oh wow, yeah.
That way.
Lawson is expected 19. No, hang on. I might need to refresh. Where does it think Lawson? No, it still thinks Lawson at 13 points.
I posted mine anyway, Adam. While you're waiting for us to sort out, if you wouldn't mind hitting that like and that share button, would really appreciate that. Just make it feel like we got it.
If you're here and you're having a good time, hit that like button so we know what works.
Yeah, let us know you're here by hitting like. That's a good one.
Yes, let us know.
Oh, and there I am.
Surprise! Zach's came up first in my For You page. We know who I've been stalking the most on X. Zach, talk us through it.
Yeah.
Did you put a 2X driver on, Zach?
Oh yeah, my God. Why is it not put the 2X? I didn't screw up the 2X. It is on Lando Norris.
Are you sure?
That's where I come back and it's on like Bortoletto or something. No, I've just double checked. It is on Lando Norris, but it's very much balancing the points, very similar to Adams. I think we're on the same wavelength on this sort of situation because 6 of my 7 assets looking like they could increase again if we're talking with Behrman, and I just like how with Bortoletto instead of Hadjar again gives me a bit more money for in Japan if I need to make any drastic changes, because I'm going to quickly go over to my team and look, if I got rid of Norris and Stroll, it frees up 38.2 million in budget, which is so much, which could really help me down the line if I need a quick escape. And let's say I then needed to get off Williams, I'd have 51.1 million to play around with only a minus 10. Whereas that's why I'm a little bit more worried about the Piastri builds, because you're more set in stone with Piastri. You kind of have to have him as an asset. Whereas if you go Norris, you could go, okay, Norris didn't do well. I can now drop down to one of Piastri if he looks better, or one of the Ferraris if he looks better, or even George Russell sort of thing. And then with my cheap drivers, yeah, it very much is expected price budgeting good, and a Bortoletto I just have to deal with.
And to your point too, Zach, when you do that math, also assume 0.3 for Norris, 0.6 for Stroll, 0.6 for Williams.
Of
in
course,
that math,
yeah.
you add it up. So you're coming up on 52, 53 million in change between the couch cushions that you could have for Suzuka if you need to change the team out. All right, Terry, without further ado, let's head over to you.
I'm excited to see this.
How many Max Verstappens do we have on Terry's team?
We haven't got Max Verstappen.
Oh my goodness. Hey, it's an Oscar team.
There it is.
There's the Oscar team Zach said he didn't want to go into.
But this is the full gainers. Terry, do you want to walk us through your team?
Yeah, like I said, I made some big mistakes, so this was the best way of getting out of it, and also hopefully will get me quite a big substantial budget gain actually. So this one's purely about money and moving it to a place where if I had to use a wildcard, which I did have to anyway, was use it in a way which I'm hoping will pay off big and get me some big budget gains and lines, so it doesn't feel like it was a waste of one, if I'm honest. Like I said, I made the mistakes and moved it out there beginning of the week, which left me with the team I had was due to score okay points wise, but budget wise was actually not due to score a lot of budget gain at all. So that's the reason I moved out of it. I looked at it and thought, can I run with it? Which was a serious option to say, actually, it wasn't too bad. But it wasn't going to get me any budget at the end of it. So it was kind of like move away from it and actually get some budget early on indoors.
There's some questions in the chat about where to leave your lineup on the FanAmp app. So if you go to chats at the bottom of the app, we are the fantasy formula. Just join our base. And then the middle sub chat is called lineup cues. If you just drop a picture in that chat, our producer Greg will throw it up on a slide that I'll refresh in just a moment, that we can go over your team. But also if you put
Coming
in
back
any
to the
of
poll
the
as well, budget building. So very much on the side of what we're looking at, all of us, 78% are going for the budget building compared to points this weekend. So we could see some really crazy strategies coming out.
I do like a little group thing.
Right.
Because, if we all go for the same team, a McLaren Williams build, and then something goes south, at least we're all in it together. We're not going to all be depressed on Monday and everyone else is celebrating. We'll be in it together.
Yeah, it's where we find out the budget build tool is wrong because it's based on data we're not 100% sure of, and wake up Monday morning and it's something completely different.
Oh, I have some very unhappy people in my chat. That
Absolutely.
All right, I'm seeing some new lineups pop up in the FanAmp app right now, so those directions were good. Here is Surf and Night. Which one of these? Oscar, McLaren, Williams, or Oscar Antonelli, Ferrari, Haas? Ooh, loving that Ferrari power unit down here. But for me, I like Team A.
Team
Go
A.
with the home team. Lots of good price gain coverage. You've got all of your assets fixing to gain price this week, barring any huge setbacks. You do on the other team too, but boy, Haas could show up with 10, 15 points on a sprint weekend and you'd just be devastated with that delta.
Just look at this. I know that Aeroblade was trying to download the app. So can we just have a look at that one, which is Ocon, Haas, plus McLaren, Norris, Behrman, that questionnaire. So I know that Aeroblade, I think further up, hasn't got the app yet to submit theirs.
Yes.
And he's asking
feel free to
questions.
Feel free to post which country you're from, Aeroblade, too. Sometimes that could direct us one way or another on what the technical issue is.
Yeah, I just don't. I'm not sure they've just downloaded it yet. I just know that they were saying earlier on that they were trying to download it for the next race. So if we could touch on that one, that would be great.
Before I do that, I think Not French is having a panicking moment. Tried to change my team and can't, says it's a technical issue. Whatever you're using, change to something else. If you're on the app, use a browser. If you're on the browser, use the app, and you should be okay.
Log out, log back in.
The old,
I've seen a
Nintendo
question here
cartridge
as
taking
well.
a blow on it.
Mercedes or Ferrari for fastest pit stops this weekend? I'd be inclined to think Ferrari. Right? Yeah.
Mercedes slow and steady on their pit stops, to be fair, rather than spectacular. So I would say Ferrari. So what was Aeroblades? Ocon, Haas. That one there. Ocon, Haas plus McLaren, Norris, Behrman, Stroll.
The second lineup is Zach. Bortoletto, Williams, McLaren.
Oh, is it?
Norris,
Yes.
Behrman, Stroll, Hulkenberg.
Yes.
And I'm one.
Well, you're sitting
pick off of
pretty.
that. So I like option number 2.
Yeah, option number 2. I think Zach will say option number 2. Otherwise, he's going to look a bit silly, isn't he?
Yeah, I'd be a bit surprised if I said one thing, and then was just like, nah, actually, I
Yeah,
prefer that other
yeah.
option.
Actually, here's my team, but actually, don't pick that at all. Go for something completely different.
It's the
Reverse
beauty of a
psychology,
sprint
try and get
race is
people
that
not looking at it.
we've had all day to think about our lineups. It's really funny that they updated the Sims in the last 15 minutes so we can start mini panicking again. But for the most part, on a sprint race, we can come into the live show with a sense of what our lineups are.
Absolutely.
Where can I
Young
see
Hart,
you guys' lineup? So it's on the ticker on the bottom, but also I can give you a quick pass through. What you see here is my team: Norris, McLaren, Williams with Stroll, Behrman, Hulkenberg, Hadjar. If you get rid of Hadjar and put in Bortoleto, that is Zach's team. And Terry's slightly different with Piastri, double Haas, Gasly.
Oh, I tell you what, if McLaren have a DNF, this will not go well.
Just look at that quickly. Scott, if you're anything around -20, I'd probably start considering a wild card. I think Adam said earlier that's the sort of area where you'd go, actually, it may be worth just using it to get out of that with a -20, to be honest. George has said, can you look at an ultimate wildcard team and maybe a differential one?
We reviewed one earlier that had triple Mercedes that seems super differential because that allows you to run all of the price gainers with George and Kimmy. I would have put the 2X on George on that particular lineup, but it is a big differential that's pretty safe.
Yeah, I'd like to come back to a point I've seen quite a bit when people are talking about wildcards. I think the general idea is if you can take a -10 to get to a team you're happy with, I would do that. But once it becomes -20 or above, that's when you start looking into the wildcard sort of thing.
We joked about it last year. If you take it for a -10, it's a mild card. If you take it for a -60, it's the wild card.
Aeroblade wants to know why I went for why did you pick Ocon and Haas over Bottas Williams? Purely budget. The Sims are saying I'm going to get more budget from those two, and so that's why my lineup went. I went with the Sims on it, and I've put my faith in it, which is something I don't do very often, actually. I must say, probably one of the first time I've done that in a while. I'm normally a spur of the moment sort of guy who goes off my gut feeling. So, uncharted territories. That has convinced me that the Sims are quite good. So, shameless plug there for the ultimate work the guys do at Fancy Tools. But yeah, mine's purely based on that one after I made my mistakes.
Just to reiterate as well, on the Norris versus Piastri on who you'd have in your build, at the minute, 51% have Piastri as their top 80 driver and 43% have Norris. So it really is basically going to be a split 50-50 on who's happy or not coming out of this weekend.
When we look at the overall game, Lando is at 26 and Oscar is also at 26.
Wow.
The most owned drivers are Sainz at 53%, Alonso at 43%, and Ollie Behrman at 40%.
There's the interest one. I mean, have you got the odds checker? I know you're normally the guy who's got the odds. So someone's asked if you've got the odds on Piastri's looking surprisingly good, given his current grid order.
I didn't have it up, but I'm so glad someone's inspired by it. Let's talk about it.
So someone's obviously noticed it's missing, to be fair.
Well, look here. So Oscar Piastri over Hamilton with the best odds to win the sprint. So there is some love for that McLaren pace. Boy, look at those Williams parked right up in 7 and 8 with those odds. Wow. And then when we look ahead to the Grand Prix, that's 1-2 McLaren. Wonderful news there for those of us investing.
Look at that Lewis one though. That's worth a flare.
Wow, yeah.
Yeah, not the worst odds I've ever seen for Lewis. If I can get to my phone, pull up DraftKings fast enough.
Everyone's heading over now.
I want to go to this. Let's go to the scary stuff. First driver retirement. Avert your eyes, fans of the rookies. It's a tie between Bortoleto, Hadjar, Doohan, and Behrman. We've all got a piece of one of them for the most part. So you just have to light your favorite votive candle and just keep your fingers crossed.
And pray. Someone talked about using Limitless now because on the next sprint most people are gonna have 2 top drivers. Interesting thoughts. So getting the points gain now before people have got 2 top drivers. What's your thoughts on that one, Adam?
I think the theory behind this is that Limitless is better earlier in the season because a Limitless budget is bigger than our small budgets. And as our budgets grow, that gap gets smaller and smaller. And so I think there's a preference to use it earlier in the season than, say, at Brazil. But for me, unless if you had a very good team in Australia, everyone gained price and they're fixing to do it again in China, I have no problem using Limitless. But
Yeah.
I think for us that had a blend of winners and losers, I had to get out of it. Ooh, Andrew putting a little juju on the Williams drivers that they are also top 8 on the DNF list. I'm gonna scroll away from it so nobody averts their eyes. Back to the sprint.
Oh, see, now I've seen this comment, and this is quite a fun one because finally we get to talk a little bit about just points-wise who looks better. Who would you go for, Hulkenberg or Stroll? They're both due for that 0.6 increase, so we both know most likely that they'll get the increase. So it's all about the points now, realistically.
Hulkenberg potentially with that pit lane start.
All right. Couple new lineups here. JP wants to know, keep my lineup or take Adams. There's a question from Brian in the chat. Or what are your lineups? I'll give you a quick hint. This one on the right is mine. Zach's is identical with Hadjar out and Bortoletto in. Terry's is relatively the same with Piastri instead of Lando.
Gasly's in
instead of Hulkenberg, and then Gasly instead of Hadjar.
Yeah, so George, my opinion is that Gasly's going to get me some much needed budget. as George asked in the chat, so
I hope so.
I've got to say, that first team, they must have had a very nice a decent Australia, because wow, I don't see a lot of teams with Piastri, Mercedes, Ferrari who can fit in a lot of the budgeting drivers.
Yeah. So this is one of the few times I almost prefer the team on the left, because you can now hold the wild card, still get really good cost cap growth, still fairly decent points for this weekend, and then you can use your wild card some other time. I know a lot of people have talked about using the wild card to set up a really good cost cap gaining team right before Limitless, since it counts twice. That could set you up for something really good. I kind of like the team on the left.
There's a question in there, Adam. Someone's put, what if I use Limitless and next Grand Prix I've only 2 free transfers, if that's true, so I'm guaranteed to get negative points?
So the Limitless team, once your score is finalized, it's going to revert back to your Australia lineup. If you try anything funny in the next few minutes and make some transfers and then use Limitless, those are all forgotten. You're going to go right back to Australia. So you can afford a regular team come Japan, but you'll only have 2 free transfers if you don't like it.
Yep.
All right. The mayor is here. And the mayor wants to know my lineup on the right, or...
The mayor wants to vote. The mayor wants to vote. There's one there.
Basically, Terry's lineup on the left, besides Gasly instead of Albon, and you have Ocon instead of Hulkenberg, but very similar sort of Terry versus Zach and I build.
I would actually say left one.
If I do say so myself. I think the benefits here are the team on the left, you can stretch so that the 5th driver is gaining value, so it's a little bit more cost cap upside. Zach and I like the team on the right because you have a little bit more flexibility to pivot out of a team if you really need a shift for Japan. Like if Ferrari or Red Bull or someone else is really making a run up the grid, you could shift pretty quickly basically by moving these 3 assets in the middle. Ooh, there's a request for more Zach.
I did just see that while I was putting up the next poll.
More cowbell, more Zach. Zach, what do you think about these teams?
I know we just got mute so you can get more Zach.
Yeah, no. Is that
surprise,
surprise.
Zach's mom's in the chat.
I've gone to my secret alt account. No, surprise, surprise. I quite like the right-sided team. Yeah, it really is. It's a lot of preference as well. So, like I've mentioned before, it's who do you think is going to perform better, Piastri or Norris? I think Norris will get more points in F1 Fantasy, so I've gone that side. And then it also comes down to how much you're working with the team budgeting, because I've spoken to a few people where the Norris builds, again, you can't really work your magic with the assets who look like they're going to get 0.6 million increases. So then all of a sudden it's like, well, it doesn't look too good. I'd have to go with the Piastri build. So I've seen that sort of thing. But then also the Piastri build is foundation with the foundations better for building a budget. It's just I'm willing to take that potential 0.6 million less in budget for what I believe could be about 40-ish points gap with the 2 times on between Norris and Piastri. So that's where my head's at least for these 2 teams.
Zach, so much love for you in the chat.
There
2
is.
people now have won their league because of you. Zach was one of the top, maybe the top fantasy creator last year in our league, top 1,000 in the world. Lots of flowers for you, Zach.
To be fair, we're absolutely delighted to have Zach with us on a serious note. Yeah, so
thank you for holding us up, Zach.
Yeah. Hit the like button.
Thank you very much.
Hit the like button to give Zach some love.
Yes.
I'm going to make sure this season I get back into the top 1,000. Show everyone that it wasn't just a 1 season off.
A fluke.
If you want more Zach, hit the like button.
Yeah.
We'll make sure that Terry and I shut up properly.
If we get to 50 likes, Adam and I go on mute. You just hear from Zach.
Take a look at this team.
Whoa.
Jay, I can't co-sign this, my friend. Triple Alpine and Sauber. Can't do it. Unless you have some very funky notes in your league where you can't start a top 10 driver, or you have to have the least budget possible. I've seen some of those leagues. They're very fun. I just can't do it.
It feels like they were missing half the assets when they made that lineup. Yeah, maybe scroll down the page and pick some different ones.
The thing I'd be interested to see with that lineup as well is how much budget would you have left over? You'd have a good 20-ish million maybe.
That's a lot of leftover budget. So I think there might be something funky with that league because I have seen it where either a no max league or the least budget possible without taking huge penalties. So perhaps that's what they're going for. We've got Rachel May Cook, and Rachel may have a very similar lineup to Terry.
Very so Albin Gaz, isn't it? Seems to be the difference on that one. So I would say Rachel is certainly cooking with that lineup.
So coming back to Australia lineups compared to China lineups as well, a lot of people agree with, well, maybe not the wildcard usage, but they agree McLaren and Williams, 73%, agree that is a better lineup than the Ferrari Mercedes. So it looks like most people are definitely in agreement that the wildcard was needed.
Andrew wants to know, is Rachel going to cook?
Yes.
Lineup, I think so, and the chat agrees. All right, we've got Brian that says, only 1 move left. Is it time for the wild card? I'm afraid so. Because I think you've got basically three price losers on the bottom.
Yeah.
And as we just
Constructors
ran through between the chat consensus, between the F1 Fantasy Tools consensus, I think you're going to want to do some work with the wild card there.
Yeah, definitely.
And then it's basically McLaren and Williams as your constructors, take that extra cost cap and then bump up one of the bottom 3 drivers. So you're taking as few negatives as possible. Is Rachel back?
Yeah, I mean, that team again is just great for budgeting. And I mean, we'll see what happens, because if it could easily come out that Piastri beats Lando Norris, gets more points, and then all of a sudden you're getting better budget and better points. It's one of those things where you just have to. It really is. You just have to go with your gut when it comes to Norris or Piastri.
Zach, great question from Astroblade for you. What's your plan to move from double premium constructor setup, or move to the double premium constructor setup later versus this McLaren Williams setup that we like here?
So when we're talking about double premium setup, are we talking about when we get enough budget to have 2 A-tier drivers, or back to 2 premium constructors?
I think going to a point that Terry had earlier, Williams can only keep up this pace for so long before you have to start thinking about the 2026 car.
Yeah.
They might slip off. And then that between Red Bull, Ferrari, Mercedes, you're going to want 2 of them. How do you make that fit?
I think it'll be pretty soon. It'll probably be B. I think my mind is thinking I'm going to be messing about a lot with budget building, basically up until Miami. Then I'll do one last crazy budget building before Miami, limitless. And then I'll only have 2 free transfers. I might take a -10 and -20. We'll see what happens. But yeah, that's the plan. Build up as much budget as I can, because then I'm trying to get to a point where I could bring in McLaren, Mercedes, and Norris, or get to another point of maybe McLaren, Ferrari, Norris, or McLaren, Mercedes, Piastri and Russell. Something like that is where my mind is heading to. But we're a long way off of that just yet.
Just looking at Isaac, looks like they got an urgent question before they lock in their lineup. Piastri and Kimi, Norris and Stroll, 4 million in budget. Help is all I saw. I saw the help.
Oh wow! They
Jack and I
both
have
give the
Norris and
exact
Stroll.
same budgeting as well, so it really would again come down to points. Oh, now on their own, I would have to think what Piastri and Kimi would get more points.
More
But
points,
when you
yeah.
add two times into the mix, it does make things a little bit more interesting.
I'm going with Norris and Stroll on this one. Just sticking with my gut. And while we're talking about our gut, guys, let's talk about our FanAmp picks for this week. Zach was our big winner last week, and I see we have very similar answers all the way across the board, except Zach thinks that Liam Lawson is going to have worse qualifying than the rookies and the Salvers.
Yeah, I mean, I saw enough in sprint quali.
Interesting.
20th was all I needed.
I tried to put some, not too much of a jinx on McLaren, putting Piastri off of my podium for Lewis and Max, but I do hope he finds himself there. We all think the winning margin is going to be tight, but not razor thin. And I think we will have a ton of different teams in the top 10, some Williams coverage, maybe some Alpine coverage on top of the usual suspects. So if you aren't playing yet, please be sure while you're in the FanAmp app, submitting your teams, play against us because our sponsor, Fifth Gear Garms, is giving away a prize each and every week.
Yeah, I am modelling my latest Fifth Gear Garms top this week, by the way, which arrived fresh yesterday morning. So thank you to those for sending that one through. Absolutely great quality.
Mine is on a boat heading here, but I can't wait to wear mine.
It's on a boat, yeah.
Oh,
Terry and Zach, I want to talk about Banana Fart Man, and I hope that's a team name that got approved on the app. This is very similar to what we have here, just double coverage on Sauber with Fernando Alonso. I love that Fernando Alonso could drop another 0.6 million and be the cheapest Fernando Alonso we ever have seen. So I like him for Suzuka. It's a little risky now, but maybe with transfer setup, maybe you're just going to take that hit this week and position yourself for some good Alonso next week.
Yeah, I like it.
Yeah, it's not the worst thing I've ever seen. Again, I just don't like how much money's tied up with Alonso, but that is more of a personal preference because a lot of people will be sticking with these teams for quite a long time.
Hit refresh just to make sure we don't have any new lineups in here. There aren't, so I'm going to come back over here.
Jezel, my lineup at the minute, well, I say at the minute, I've locked it in, so I won't be changing it, is Norris ×2, Bortoletto, just because he's cheap and I had to have one of them, Behrman, Stroll, Hulkenberg, McLaren, and Williams. So I'm very much on Norris getting more points than Piastri this weekend.
This is my team here, and this is the only difference.
No negative chip. When's the best time to use it? Probably last weekend. Would have been the best time.
So many people in my comments saying, why didn't you think to use it in Australia? How many people were talking about painted lines in the middle of the circuit getting wet and causing all the rookies to go off? Nobody.
Absolutely. No one.
So there are plenty of opportunities for sprint races. You get 3 events to potentially lose
Brazil,
positions or DNF.
You
have lots of wet races. You got Brazil, Singapore, Spa, etc. So lots of good chances to use no negative. I'm not worried about it.
Monaco. Yeah. So yeah. So yeah, it's Monaco with rookies. So I will just leave that one right here. Monaco rookies and no negative. That's certainly where my head's at the moment with that one. Definitely.
Not bad at all. We're talking about some team names in the chat. I'm glad to see Brian's 130 ARG was finally approved at long last. This is one of the legendary names in the game, Brian. So I'm glad you got it. A couple of other ones in the chat that were rejected that I won't say out loud, but definitely direct your eyes to it because there are some gems. Feel free. We got 5 minutes left. So if you haven't locked in your lineup, be sure to do that. Or it's lightning round time in the chat. Just send us your questions.
Just so I'm looking if you missed anything.
So I've just put up a poll. I'll see how that goes. Asking, will anyone run any Antonelli in their team? So far, 77% saying no. I can understand that, but I definitely see where the head is at with those 25% saying yes. 100% they're going pure budget building.
I agree with Farrow in the chat. Would consider Antonelli, but not in this race. We saw a team earlier that had triple Mercedes if you want a super differential build. But for those of us that are trying to play over the middle, play for the long haul, I would recommend just something a little bit more basic.
Yeah, just to touch on that one, how can I have my team on your stream? If you download the FanAmp app, then you can submit it there before the lineups lock, before we go live or whilst we live on air, and then we can review it. So they go onto the fantasy form the base and drop into there.
Lots of love.
We
in
are
the
on
chat.
53 likes as well. Let's try. What should we aim for? 53. What can we get to before the live stream ends?
Well, I think at least 60.
55.
Whoever's
Yeah,
left,
go
here,
on.
just hit the like button.
Yeah, if you're here, press like.
Let's try and get to 65, everyone.
Thanks to all of you in the chat. That's awesome. We've got one new lineup that we just couldn't get on the screen fast enough from Janmar. It's Norris, Ocon, Behrman, Hulk, McLaren, Williams. But the question is, Hadjar or Stroll?
Stroll.
I won't say this often, but give me Lance Stroll. The 0.6 million
Stroll.
is almost automatic.
Yeah, if you're waiting to lock that in, lock in Lance Stroll and quickly before it locks for you.
Yes.
I've seen quite a few people as well ask on this side of things, where it's like, obviously this isn't something that we know, so it'd just be like personal like opinion on whether they would do it. A lot of people have asked if the budget building and like the price changes are correct coming out of race 3, would F1 Fantasy, do you think, switch it up mid-season?
No.
Yeah.
It's very, very rare for them to switch pricing mid-season. Last time I saw it happen was 2022 when we had the sentiment that boosted drivers up or down. We had that one user that created a ton of teams with a bot and manipulated the system. Then they came in and changed it. But barring anything crazy, I think they'll just go with the flow.
Yeah, I think it's a lot more difficult than what we think to change the pricing, if I'm honest. So I think that it would be risky for them to try and change it. So I think if the pricing is right, we'll see it for the remainder of this season. If more than anything, they review it again for next year, a bit like I did last year, and change it for this year, if any of the reasons on there.
I think.
By the way, By the way, I'll just say we've got up to 73 likes in that last like 3-minute push. That is incredible.
I should have begged sooner.
We got 3 minutes. Go quick. Go to 100. Come on, we have 3 minutes left. You know.
Awesome. Yes, a lot of good luck messages in the chat. Good luck to each and every one of you this week. Let's rack up a ton of points, get that momentum for Japan in 2 weeks. We'll be back with our Japan preview in 2 weeks. We've got chip guides everywhere, now on YouTube, now on fanamp.com/fantasy. We get the price guide on fanamp.com/fantasy. So all of our content will be there waiting for you during the off week.
Yeah, I did see someone put in the chat earlier about guides saying about a video about price guide. I don't know if there's a video yet. I know Adam's certainly done an article on it.
I have the article on fanamp.com/fantasy. I'm trying to cook up something special for a video during the off week, so stay tuned on that.
So yeah, I did see that one earlier. Jam sandwich is back. Jam sandwich made me very hungry last week, and it's done the same this week. Especially this time of the morning. Budget is king, absolutely, and that username is just absolutely immense, and keeps making me want to go and do jam sandwich. Jensen loves a jam sandwich, so it reminds me of him when I see that one. You know,
someone has just jinxed in the chat the Chinese Grand Prix. They put it can't be worse than Australia. Good luck.
Why would you do that 2 minutes ago?
This is the moment we clip next week when all of us have a drinking problem.
Yeah.
All right, we're in this last minute here, so thank you all so much for joining us for this hour. I know, especially for those of you in Europe, it's very late. We're early, depending on what your definition is. We really appreciate you hanging out with us.
Yeah, and just obviously make sure, like we said, that you are liking and subscribing to the channel, because then you'll be notified when we do go live. So you'll be notified when these streams are going up. So if you haven't already, do us an absolute favor and hit that subscribe button. And appreciate you all either getting up late or staying up early, whichever one we're in, and hopefully a better time next time. At least for us, Zach, anyway.
Yeah, for me, it's 2 a.m. for Japan, so I get my turn. I get my turn. Thanks so much for watching, everybody. We'll see you in Japan.